Coming up next on the Giants Chronicles podcast, we recap the Saquon Barkley situation and we give you a training camp preview of who are some names I'm watching and what I'm looking forward to see at training camp. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Giants Chronicles podcast. I am your host, Gabe, and we are back, guys. It has been a minute. I took a bit of a break during the offseason. Not a lot going on. Obviously, I did cover free agency, and, there's a lot to talk about since then and what's happened with the Giants organization. So first, I'm going to just start with the Saquon Barkley thing. Obviously, I didn't give you a lot of coverage on that situation. I decided to take a step back. A lot of other Giants content creators were covering it, and, I didn't want to say the same thing others were saying. I want to give you content that you can't find everywhere else. But today we're going to just go into everything near Giants training camp. But I want to start with the Saquon Barkley situation. So obviously Saquon Barkley, the tag deadline was last Monday at 4 p.m. and the Giants did not get a deal done. And now Barkley is going to either hold out the season or sign the tag, which is what I believe he will end up doing. There's also another option that we can discuss that's probably more unlikely, but is also an option. So the one thing with the situation was Saquon Barkley changed representation just a couple days before the deadline, really, to have a second agent from CAA go in on the negotiations. Now, before, he did have a representative from CAA doing all his endorsements and stuff. But the representative from CAA did not do the negotiations. Kim Malley from Rock Nation was in charge of negotiating for Saquon's contract. So they added the CAA guy, which kind of made you feel like maybe they'll get a deal done here. Maybe they will. It give you some, positive, enthusiasm. Like maybe this gets done. And so a lot of people were saying, Ryan Dunleavy, who was probably the most in tune to the Saquon Barkley situation, was saying he thought it was going to get done. A lot of the reporters were pretty positive about getting done what they were hearing, and then it didn't get done. We hear they ended $2 million apart in negotiations. I mean, you would think that they could bridge that gap just to get to that final. When you get so far like that, you would hope they can bridge that gap, meet in the middle, but it just seems like Saquon's side was too stubborn, and rightfully so. Joe Schoen was standing his ground. And I think that's really important for a young GM like Joe Schoen, who built a relationship with Saquon this past year. There are pictures of them at training camp, practices, laughing together. I mean, they had a good relationship, and that might be ended right now. And Joe Schoen stood his ground. He didn't give too much money. It's just a shame that this is how this situation ended. Obviously, you would think this is Saquon's last year on the field for the Giants unless they tag him again, which would just be a shame for Saquon's side of things, just because a running back doesn't get a lot of chances to earn a big contract. And, his chances are running out. So hopefully all is good in Saquon. I've been watching Saquon since I've been like 8 at Penn State. I'm a huge Penn State fan. I live in Pennsylvania, so obviously Saquon is pretty close, one of my favorite players, and it's obviously really a shame what has happened and how this unfolded. I'm sure Saquon's hurt. I'm sure he wishes it went the other way, but like he said, it is what it is. You can't go back now, and now we have to flip the page to training camp and move on, because it is training camp season, and this is the time when there's going to be a lot of battles, and including battles. The Giants also added some depth going into training camp. They had James Robinson, a running back who's been a 1,000-plus running back, coming out of the draft in 2020, I believe, undrafted. He went on to have 1,000 yards for the Jaguars and earned the starting back role. Still did good in the Urban Meyer system, and then this past year got traded to the Jets halfway through the season. Didn't do much at the Jets. Seemed like he didn't have a really great time there. Signs a 2-year, $4 million deal with the Pats in free agency, but then they cut him. So It just seems like, he's kind of like someone that we're going to have to develop a little, but maybe could be there if Saquon really does hold out and can be there. It's probably like it's a vet minimum contract, and so shouldn't be too much baggage there. It's kind of just an insurance problem or insurance piece. Then you have the signing of Cole Beasley, which is an interesting signing. Obviously, the Giants flirted with Cole Beasley all of last year. I mean, Joe Shane and Brian Daboll obviously have that relationship from Buffalo with Cole Beasley. Cole Beasley was very successful in Brian Daboll's offense. He really was. He was a big piece of it. He had, I believe, 900-plus yard season in it. So obviously, someone who knows the system, someone who knows Daboll, which gives him a leg up in a sense in this big wide receiver battle, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But now that's another slot wide receiver thrown in the mix for that battle. And it'll be interesting to see how that turns out just because of how many people are going to be battling to make the roster at the wide receiver position. So that's kind of your week. That's kind of your transaction update just on the latest in the New York Giants. Now we're going to give you a training camp preview because it's training camp in a couple days. In-person training camp start, I believe, on Wednesday, and I believe they start reporting tomorrow, which when you're watching this is today on Monday. So I just want to give you a training camp preview, some under-the-radar type of guys that I'm watching, stuff like that. So we're going to start on offense here, and Paris Campbell is obviously a name that sticks out to me. Paris Campbell coming off of his best season. He played in all 17 games. He had 63 receptions, 623 yards, 3 touchdowns. Paris Campbell really had his best year this past year. He stayed healthy the full season, which a lot of the concern with Paris Campbell, he was very hyped up coming out of Ohio State, second round to the Colts, was supposed to be a future wide receiver one for the Colts. And it just really never clicked throughout, the first couple of years. And then this past year, which is the bizarre thing is this past year was the most, there was like no quarterback for the Colts. I mean, then Nick Foles, Sam Ellinger, and Matt Ryan all split time playing quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. So even with those quarterback issues, he still was able to produce. And that's kind of what excites me about Paris Campbell. He's short, he's speedy, and it's looked like what he did in minicamp is looking like the Giants are going to use him. They gave him like a very incentive-based contract. I believe it was like a $3 million contract, which he can make up to 8.5. Don't quote me on that, but a very incentive-based contract that was a very good deal looked at by the general public. An exciting deal just see what he's got. I think he could be a big piece on this offense this year if he stays healthy again this year. And I think he could put up upwards of 700-plus yards, but there's a lot of people for the ball to go around. So I'm very excited about Paris Campbell. I think he's kind of an under the radar type of player, and he's still like 25. So should be an exciting thing to watch in camp just to see what he's got, what he's looking like in this offense. And that brings in another acquisition in the offseason. That would be Darren Waller. Now listen, guys, Darren Waller has struggled the past couple years, but we have seen the talent from Darren Waller. Darren Waller's talent is evident. And the thing that has kept him back the past couple years is just the injuries have been outrageous. Injury after injury Darren Waller has had, and it's been a shame. But obviously the Raiders had enough. The Raiders said, look, he's a cancer in our locker room. He's this. And Joe Shade said, all right, we'll give him a fresh slate here in New York. We'll trade our 3rd round comp pick to you, which isn't giving up a lot. They got it from the Chiefs. So we'll trade that to you, and here you go. You have a former All-Pro, Pro Bowler caliber player to play for your team. That's what the Giants did. And obviously an excellent move by Joe Shane. Obviously an excellent move. So, they got a Pro Bowl caliber player, Darren Waller. And I'm also interested to see how he does in camp. Is he acclimated to the offense? Does he have a good relationship with Daniel Jones? Is he on page with the offense? Does he know his plays? Does he know his routes? Does he know his blocking schemes? How is he blocking? That's another question. He's more of a pass catching tight end. Is he a good blocker? Can he stand his ground in blocking? And so I'm interested to see how that goes. He obviously has had a past couple years have been down, but in 2019, 2020, he had 2 back-to-back 1,000 plus yard years for the Raiders, and that's really where you saw that talent. But even this past year, you still saw the talent. When he came back at the end of the season, he didn't want to play for that coaching staff. He didn't want to be there. You could still see that talent, and obviously it's just a matter of does he stay healthy, which is pretty important. So we'll just excited to see Darren Waller in training camp. Obviously, is the number one target in this offense, but he has a supporting cast around him. And that's the important thing to note is not everything is going to be on Darren Waller. So now let's get into our wide receiver core. Obviously, we have a lot of guys on this wide receiver depth chart, wide receiver room going into training camp. Should make some fun preseason games for us Giants fans to watch, even though preseason games cannot be the most exciting. But if you are in tune to the Giants, if you know your roster up and down, it should be preseason games should be a blast for you. So let's just get started. There's a lot of guys on this roster, and in the wide receiver room. So let's just name some few. Obviously, you have the 4 given ones. You got Jalen Hyatt, Slayton, Hodgins, Hyatt, Paris Campbell, and then you have Shep and Wandell. So Shep and Wandell are probably going to start out on the PUP list. That means they'll start out on the PUP list. They can be taken off at any time. But once it gets closer to the season, I believe that does change. They have to be out. I believe it's like 4 to 6 weeks if they are on week 1. So that'll be interesting to see who does make the 53. But then you have guys like Colin Johnson, Jamison Crowder, Cole Beasley, Khalil Pimpleton, who are all, kind of good players, solid players in the NFL, who are going to be more of your who has the most special teams value. Jess Smith as well also brings special team value. So there's going to be a lot of consideration how they're going to fill that bottom of the wide receiver chart. And we'll just see. Khalil Pimpleton is a name that I would keep an eye on, kind of under the radar kind of name. Very good punt return from what we heard from practices, from reporters. It seemed like last year he was really clicking at punt return. Some Giants fans question why they never gave him a shot, just because of how bad our special teams were this past year. But maybe he makes it this year. I don't think Jamison Crowder still has it. I thought it was kind of like a sign that maybe he goes off in camp, but I will be watching all these wide receivers closely because of how close of a competition this is at camp. So definitely something to highlight. If you're asking me today what my predictions for the depth chart are Paris Campbell, Slayton, or in order, Hodgins, Slayton, Campbell, Hyatt, Shep. I think they carry 7. Colin Johnson, who is coming off of the ACL, was really good in practice last year, really good in training camp, really good in preseason. Looked like he was going to make the roster. I think Colin Johnson makes it on there. And I think Cole Beasley makes it on there as well. I think Brian Dable will play favorites, which every coach does, play their favorites. Every coach does. Whether you think it or not, every coach plays their favorites. So I think that will be an interesting battle to see unfold. But, I mean, obviously, I will have a 53-man roster prediction out towards the end of camp in August sometime, just to predict what I think the 53 will end up looking like after camp, after I see it. I was going to do an early 53-man roster video, but I decided not to just because of how, predictions, injuries, you got to see how it unfolds. And that's the other thing to look at wide receiver position. A lot of these guys in that position have an injury history. So you've got to account for that. That's probably going to determine some of the battles. And so the other thing is who's going to be the left guard. So you have a Josh Azudu going in his second year, was a 3rd-round draft pick. One of the first Joe Shane draft picks. Do you throw the youngster in there and try to get him acclimated to the NFL, or do you keep a really solid guard and probably our best offensive lineman last year, other than Andrew Thomas, our best interior offensive lineman, I should say? Do you keep Ben Bredesen in there now, left guard? That'll be another camp battle that I will be looking at. Personally, I think Ben Bredesen is the better player. If you have Ben Bredesen under contract for another year, why would you try to brush him off to start the youngster. If Ben Bredeson looks like he's lacking in camp, then yes, you do throw Josh Ezeudu in there. But you need to be confident in what Josh Ezeudu is giving you. If you think it's going to be any less than what Ben Bredeson can give you, I don't know why you would throw him in there. I really don't. So I'm going to be watching that position as well. And also at the right tackle position, how is Evan Neal looking? Evan Neal, I believe, is really going to be a key part of what determines this 2023 season for the New York Football Giants. Evan Neal obviously was the 7th overall pick for a reason. This past year had some rookie struggles. A lot of tackles do have rookie struggles. You can look at Andrew Thomas. And right now, the Giants really just wanted to pan out as an average tackle. I mean, you really just want to be at the very least average. Now, maybe he does go some, like an Andrew Thomas, a jump in year 2. But you really just want to see some progress. And I'll be watching that in camp. I don't know if they'll have pads on the days I go to camp. I know I'm going to a 5 p.m. day. In the clicker in the line below, I showed my dates I'm going. I believe it's August 4th and 5th. So if you're there, meet up with me. But I don't know if they'll have pads on those days or not. Obviously, that'll be a determination in my evaluation. And the other thing is Daniel Jones. I'll be watching Daniel Jones very closely. You have gotten paid now. All right. You have gotten paid mostly for what your potential is in year 2 of the Brian Daboll system. You still need to put better film on tape. Was it a good year this past year? Yes. Did you make the playoffs? Yes. Did you win a playoff game? Yes. This year, you need to take another jump, Daniel. Your job is not done just because you got paid. You still have a lot of progress you need to make. And so I'll be watching that. Does he look more comfortable in camp than he did last year? Does it look like we've added some new, bigger concepts to the playbook? Does it, stuff like that? I will be watching very closely. So that's what I'm going to be watching on the offensive side of the ball. And the other thing is Mike Kafka still here? So does Daniel still produce in that Mike Kafka system? And did Mike Kafka add some stuff in the offseason? Obviously, you would hope he did, just as we're going into year 2 of the system here. But we'll see. So moving on to the defense, there's obviously a lot of position battles there as well. I'm going to start up front like I do every time on the defensive line. So obviously, the Giants had a lot of pieces at defensive line this offseason. They added Ashawn Robinson, Roquez Nacho, he's called. Raheem Roquez. I can't, I'm butchering the name, guys. I'm sorry. But obviously, he's going to be a big piece. And Ashawn Robinson as well. So you got to say those two, Leonard and Dexter, automatically make the roster. I want to see is Leonard back from the injuries, dominating again. Leonard's a $32 million cap hit this year. You would like to see him have a better year than he did this past year, of course. So I'll be watching that. And really, what does Raheem Roquez Nanos look like? So we'll be watching that. I will be having recap videos weekly, and then obviously the 2 days that I'm at camp, I'll be having daily live streams after camp. I'll go back to the hotel room, and I'll start up a live so I can let you guys know what I saw from that day. But obviously a lot of things to watch there at training camp on that front D line alone. And then who are the depth pieces behind those 4 names I just watched? Obviously your edge rushers, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Azeez Ojulari, obviously are your 2 starting edge rushers. Does Azeez look less injury prone? He said he switched up his training, didn't do as much bulking this year, which probably led to a lot of his injuries this past year, but we'll see what he looks like this year again in camp. Obviously, going into year 3, Azeez have a 4-year contract, so you really would like to see him kicking into high gear. But back to the depth behind those defensive linemen, who would you have behind it? Does DJ Davidson make the roster? He was a 5th-round pick a couple years ago. What about a Riley? I forget his name. Riley, who was a 7th-round pick. Jordan Riley, who was a 7th-round pick out of Oregon this past year. What about a Ryder Anderson from last year, who was an undrafted free agent who proved to be somewhat decent of a pass rusher and had a couple sacks last year? So who is really your depth behind those 4 guaranteed pieces? And at the edge, you have Hadi and you have Hadi behind him, and you have O'Shane Ximines, who they also signed. Would like them to see them add another quality edge rusher, maybe a Justin Houston, a Unique Ngwake. Obviously, they have to find money to add those kind of pieces, or those are expensive acquisitions. But hopefully, Joe Shea can move around some money, maybe add another edge rusher, because as fun as Hadi is in the locker room, he is a really good run stopper, or a decent run stopper, not such of a great pass rusher. So obviously, and O'Shane Ximines, kind of overhyped every year in my opinion. Has a couple good plays, but really just seems to disappear as the season goes on. So that's another topic of discussion. Who's your edge depth? A lot of lacking at the edge depth. And then you go to linebacker, another depth question. Again, this year we are having the same depth questions that we did this past year. You need depth on the roster. And the Giants just, again, don't have that. A lot of quality positions, and a lot of it's on defense. So at linebacker, you obviously have Bobby Okereke. Who is going to be by him? Mike McFadden, Darian Beavers. Obviously, probably both of them will make the roster. That's 3 linebackers. And then do you have another linebacker that makes the roster after that? But who is that linebacker? Is it Deontay Johnson, the undrafted linebacker out of Toledo, I believe? Do they add another linebacker? You would think they've been trying out linebackers in workouts. So obviously we'll probably add and subtract during the training camp, as that's what a training camp is for, cut down, stuff like that. So we'll see. And then you have your DBs, your corners, your safeties. A lot of depth questions there. You obviously have a Dory Jackson, Deonte Banks, Cordell Flott. Those guys are probably the obvious to make the roster. Who's the depth behind him? They signed Amani Oruwariye, who was from the Lions, but he had not a great year this past year compared to what he has done in the past in Detroit. He was benched, I believe, like 6 games in. So obviously, I'll be watching him in camp, seeing what the depth is really looking like behind the corners. I'll be watching Darnay Holmes very closely, who I think is a cut candidate. The Giants can make, I believe, $4.5 million from cutting him. That's a lot of money to cut a player like that, who you might just have as depth piece. Or do they do a Darius Slayton type deal where they do a restructuring? That's another option. But we'll see how that works out. Obviously, there's a lot of pieces here in the defense backfield that are to be determined. You have Aaron Robinson. Does he make the roster? I think he does if he stays healthy. Obviously, the question about him the past 2 years has been health. Just really never panned out. He's meant to play the slot, and hopefully the Giants finally put him in that slot position. This year, they've been trying to put him on the outside just because of last year and the lack of cornerback depth. Other than Amani Oruwariye, Jackson, Banks, Flott, that's probably going to be your cornerback room. And then maybe Holmes in there as a depth piece. Then you go to your safeties. You have Nick McLeod, who recently changed positions from cornerback to safety. That's another thing I'll be watching closely, just because I want to see how he does is playing at safety. Is it like a Julian Love type transition, which Julian Love became pretty good in this Wink Martindale system. So it'd be interesting to see how the coaching staff is using him at that safety position. So we'll see how that goes. But obviously, an exciting competition. There's also Justin Pinnock in the backfield. You have Xavier McKinney, obviously probably will make the roster. Xavier McKinney, not me, you're funny. He's in for a big payday after the season, by the way. So there's a lot of options in that defensive backfield, and all of those names I'll be watching. So very interesting to see how it pans out. The offseason is over. We're really going into camp. Tomorrow, the pup list, the injured players should come out. So we'll see. I think with the Cole Beasley signing, that kind of gives you a feeling that maybe Shep and Wanda are starting on the pup list. So we'll see what Beasley brings in the first couple weeks of training camp, and see when Shep and Wanda get out there. But should be an exciting training camp. If you guys are going, let me know. I'd love to, meet up. I love meeting you guys. I know I met a couple of you last year, and I started this YouTube channel this just a couple months ago, really. I believe we're a couple months in. or 5 or 6 months. And I appreciate every single one of you who subscribed. Please share this with your friends, guys. I hope you I hope you liked the episode and enjoyed it. We're back. It's been a bit of a break. This is episode 22. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it wasn't too much Saquon Barkley talk for you guys. And listen, training camp is here. It's time to get excited for Giants football. And with all that, guys, we'll be back in a couple of days with a pup list and injury list video. And we'll start breaking down each individual player group, kind of just to give you a preview of who's going to make the roster, who's not. And with all that, guys, please subscribe if you're new. Like this video if you liked it and got to this point. And with all that, let's go Big Blue.